That seems fitting for this one. We shall see. Where's my cloak hood? Okay, Phantom of the fucking Opera. I know you said organ music, but I wasn't expecting that out the bat. Doop, doop. Things I should have gotten done forever ago. Boop. Oh god. Oh god, the chaos. The chaos. The mess. Hi, I'm Sierra. I'm the Rocky Mountain Hermit. Yeah. Hi. What's in there? Okay. Sick. If I have to listen to that, look, I love you guys. I do. If this is what I build my YouTube career off of, I will love you guys forever for supporting this, because this is... Oh, this is Peter Gundry! Meaning that might be copyrighted. Shit. I just want a nice little reading playlist to go with the Fall of the House of Usher, which might very well be based off of the... Well, the show that's on Netflix right now is called The Fall of the House of Usher, and I think it's based off of this. You know, we'll see. Also, I'm rocking the very much gotten off Temu because I'm a broke ass bitch. Okay, fuckers this that probably made the design, but this is the Sanderson Witch Museum shirt. That's probably from a different creator, but I got off Temu and it's polyester and I fucking hate it. It's not fun. Anyways, speaking of Halloween and Halloween themed stuff, I'm gonna do the Masquerade Death for Halloween. So yeah, I should probably share this. I'm a hot mess. I also gotta make my bed. I haven't done that yet. I cleaned the sheets, I promise. I hate how winded I get up here. It's fucking annoying. Links. I need a link. I need to share the links. Ugh. Why does this stuff have to be so tedious? It's probably an easier way to do this. I'm just stupid. I hope that worked. I wonder if I'm lucky. I think I'm allergic to you, you asshole. He hasn't been able to go outside for a few days, so he's quite upset. He doesn't want to get his dainty little paws wet. Well, no, that's actually mean. He's actually very good at going outside during the rain. He just doesn't like to. So. But he's also a cat. But yeah, if I get attacked from behind by my cat, that's perfectly normal. Which is partially eating him. I say partially because I always make sure not to toss him off too hard. Actually, going a bit hard on the strings there, my guy. I wonder if that's a band song that they're using. Anyways. Also, the second announcement is I'm probably gonna read Percy Jackson. By probably, I mean I ordered the box set off of Amazon, so that's gonna be shipped probably by next week. Or delivered by next week. So I'm getting that. I'm probably gonna read it because Disney Plus has released or is releasing a Percy Jackson series, and Rick Riordan had a much bigger hand in actually selecting the cast, helping like actually write the stuff from what I hear. And it looks good. It looks like it's closer to the source material. So I am very excited. I am. But yeah, no, there's been a generated interest in Percy Jackson. So now is the time to go back to Harry Potter. Fight me, Harry Potter fans. I will fucking end you by breaking your goddamn wands. But yeah, obviously. Uncle Rick over J.K. Rowling any day. Any day. If they ever get into a cage match, my money is on goddamn Rick Riordan. From what I understand, he's a very sweet guy. He used to be a teacher, and the books are great. I connected with the characters. I loved reading. That was like the only thing I did not connect with him on, because I loved reading. I read that book. I read the entire series like 10 times, and then I haven't finished this thing. I just read books. What's Audible? I'm just gonna read all the books. Fight me. Anyways, let me take a sip of the fun drink, a sip of the water, and a lot harder than what it just no very person. I feel like I posted a lot, and I don't want to be obnoxious. Not at once, of course. Just over time. I don't want to pester my friends too much. Because they have their own things they do. Also, it'd be like their projects. I'm just like, that's great, pal. I'm a horrible friend. I'm a terrible friend. But I'm not a piece of shit. I'm not that bad. I'm I'm just forgetful and hesitant to look into new things. It happens. But yeah, no. I really should get a curtain for that area. It helps me feel mysterious. All right. I said I was going to take a sip of water too. I am stalling. Can't you tell? I look like a witch, low-key. Good. Now I want to light a candle. There was a reason why I liked Percy Jackson, okay? Having us fucking bullshit. Right. I really want to make my own incense. Just because, just to say I did it. It's really what I want to make most things. Was like just to see how it's done. Unfortunately, I moved to like the worst place to start doing that. Literally, there's nothing here. And it's not like I can just up and build my own fucking forge or smithy or whatever. I have to fucking go through town and go through permits, all that bullshit, and that would be impossible. So I can't fucking forge anything. Else in this town I think knows how to run a forge, and I'm too fucking much of a goddamn introvert. I'm a fucking introvert. And that's why I have you guys instead of my friends. I do have friends though. Will you burn? To this one, because if it's not gonna do it, I'm just gonna light one of my incense sticks. I got a cup from the box, tilt the cup and light from any setting by using matchstick or candle. As cup starts to burn, place a metallic or earthen base on fireproof surface. Blah blah blah. Keep windows open when burning incense cups to maintain proper airflow. Oh, that sounds so fucking tedious. It does smell real. Look, we'll make this fun. We'll make her. Hi. Also, look! I turned it into a goddamn candle holder. Well, damn time I got some use out of it. Spooky. Okay. So, this is the type I got, so this might be a bitch light. We will see. So on one side at least. Fire's neat. Hi, Loki. I should probably get a better plate. Oh! This might be tricky, actually. There we go. I just put in my little cauldron. Down south. I always get nervous before doing this, but it absolutely works. I haven't enough balls to do that without flinching back yet. Can you blame me? Ah. Right. Incense, candles no longer lit. Well, that was fun. For me, at least. If not for you, it was definitely fun for me. Nah. I got the windows open, because of course I do. That's my skirt. That's not the cloak. And now, after 21 minutes of stalling, and my cat being a fucking spastic asshole in the background, Loki, I'm gonna read you The Fall of the House of Usher. Try to withhold your shock. In the beginning, has French that I can absolutely botch. I'm 75% certain it's French. Son cruel es un luz suspendu. I'm not gonna apologize for how I pronounce that. Y'all know I'm a fucking American and that the education system is bullshit here. Come at me, Frenchies. Calling the Frenchies might not be the best thing. Well, I can't exactly edit this, so we gonna find out. During the whole of a dull, dark, and sunless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singular dreary Druon within view of the melancholy house of Usher. I did not know how it was, but with the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded any spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half pleasurable because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible. I look upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon compared to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after-dream of the reveler upon opium. The bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil, there was an iciness, a sinking which no goading of the imagination can torture into aught of the sublime. What was it? I paused to think. What was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the house of Usher? It was a mystery all insoluble, though nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. I was forced to fall back upon this unsatisfactory conclusion that while beyond doubt there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. It was possible, I reflected, a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify or perhaps annihilate its capacity for so horrible impression. And acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of of a black and lurid tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling and gazed down, but with a shudder even more thrilling than before, upon the remodeled and inverted images of the gray sedge and ghastly tree stems and the vacant and eye-like windows. Nevertheless, in this mansion of gloom, I now proposed to myself a sojourn of some weeks. Its proprietor, Roderick Usher, had been one of my boon companions in boyhood, but many years had elapsed since our last meeting. However, had lately reached me in a distant part of the country a letter from him, which in its wildly importunate nature had admitted of no other than a personal reply. The MS gave evidence of nervous agitation. The writer spoke of acute bodily illness, of a mental disorder which oppressed him, and of an earnest desire to see me as his best, and indeed his only personal friend, with a view of attempting, by the cheerfulness of my society, some alleviation of his malady. It was the manner in which all this, and much more, was said. It was the parent heart that went with his request which allowed me no room for hesitation, and I accordingly obeyed forthwith, what I still considered a very singular summons. Although as boys we had been even intimate associates, yet I really knew little of my uncle. I was aware, however, that his very ancient family had been noted, time out of mind, for a peculiar sensibility of temperament. Displaying itself through long ages and many works of exalted, beneficent, yet unobtrusive charity, as well as in a passionate devotion of the intricacies. Perhaps even more than to the orthodox and easy recognizable beauties of musical science. I learned too the very remarkable fact that the stem of the Usher race, all time honored as it was, had put forth in no period any enduring branch. In other words, that the temporary variation, so lame, it was this deficiency I considered, while running over in thought the perfect keeping of the character of the premise with the accredited character of the people, and while speculating upon the possible influences which the one, in the long lapse of centuries, might have exercised upon the other. It was this consequent undeviating transmission from sire to son emerged the original title of the estate in the quaint and equivocal appellation of the House of Usher, an appellation which seemed to include in the minds of the peasantry who used it both the family and the family mansion. I have said that the sole effect of my childish experiment, that of looking down within the time, had been too deep in the first singular impression. There can be no doubt that the consciousness of the rapid increase of my superstition, for why should I not so term it, served mainly to accelerate the increase itself. Such, I have long known, is a paradoxical law of all sentiments, having terror as a basis, and it might have been for this reason only that when I again uplifted my eyes to that house itself from its image in the pool, there grew in my mind a strange fancy, a fancy so ridiculous indeed that I but mentioned it to show the vivid force of the sensation which oppressed me. I had so worked upon my imagination, here peculiar to themselves and their immediate vicinity, at atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, a pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden hued. Shaken off from my spirit, what must have been a dream, I scanned more narrowly the real aspect of the building. Its principal feature seemed to be that of an excessive antiquity. The discoloration of ages had been great. Minute fungi overspread the whole exterior, hanging in a fine tangled webwork up from the eaves. Yet all this was apart from any extraordinary dilapidation. No portion of the masonry had fallen. In their crumbling condition of the individual stones. In this there was much that reminded me of the specious totality of old woodwork which has rotted for long years in some neglected vault. But no disturbance from the breath of the external air. Beyond this indication of extensive decay, however, the fabric gave little token of instability. Perhaps the eye of scrutinizing observer might have discovered a barely perceptible fissure, which, extending from the roof of the building in front, made its way down the wall in a zigzag direction, till it became lost in the sullen waters of the tarn. Noticing these things, I rode over a short causeway to the house. A servant in waiting took my horse, and I entered the Gothic archway of the hall. A valet, of stealthy step, thence conducted me in silence through many dark and intricate passages in my progress to the studio of his master. Much that I in way contributed, I know not how, to heighten the vague sentiments of which I have already spoken, while the objects around me, while the carving of the ceilings, the somber tapestries of the walls, the ebon blackness of the floors, and the phantasmagoric armorial trophies which rattled as I strode, were but matters to which, or to such as which, I had been accustomed from my infancy. While I hesitated not to acknowledge how familiar was all this, I still wondered to find how unfamiliar were the fancies which ordinary images were still of the family. His countenance, I thought, wore a mingled expression of low cunning and perplexed me. He accosted me with trepidation and passed on. The valet now threw open the door and ushered me into the presence of his master. The room in which I found myself was very large and lofty. The windows were long, narrow, and pointed, and at so vast a distance from the black oaken floor as to be altogether inaccessible from within. Feeble gleams of crimson light made their way through the trellised panes, and served to render sufficiently distinct through more prominent objects around. The eye, however, struggled in vain to reach the remoter angles of the chamber or the walls. The general furniture was profuse, comfortless, antique, and tattered. Many books and musical instruments lay scattered about, but failed to give any vibro. An air of stern, deep, and irredeemable gloom hung over and pervaded all. Upon my entrance, Usher arose from a sofa on which he had been lying at full length, and greeted me with vivacious warmth which had much in it. At first thought of an overdue cordiality, of the constrained effort of the ennuyé man of the world. A glance, however, at his countenance convinced me of his perfect sincerity. We sat down, and for some moments, while he spoke not, I gazed upon him with a feeling half of pity, half of awe. Surely, man had never before so terribly altered in so brief a period as had Roderick Usher. It was with difficulty that I could bring myself to admit the identity of the one before me with the companion of my early boyhood. Yet the character of his face had been at all times remarkable. Cadaverousness of complexion, an eye large, liquid, and luminous beyond comparison. Lips somewhat thin and very pallid, but of a surprisingly beautiful curve. A nose of a delicate Hebrew model, but with a breadth of nostril, unusual and similar formations, finely molded chin, speaking in its want of prominence, a want of moral energy, hair of a more than web-like softness and tenuity. These features, with an ordinate expansion above the regions of the temple, made up altogether a countenance not easily to be forgotten. And now, in the mere exaggeration of the prevailing character of these features, and of the expression they were wont to convey, lay so much of change that I doubted to whom I spoke. The now ghastly pallor of the skin and this now miraculous luster of the eye, above all things, startled and even awed me. The silken hair, too, had been suffered to grow all unheeded, and as in its wild gossamer texture floated rather than fell about the face, I could not, even with effort, connect its arabesque expression with it. In the manner of my friend, I was at once struck with an incoherence, an inconsistency, and I soon found this to arise from a series of feeble and futile struggles to overcome an habitual trepidancy, an excess of nervous agitation. For something of this nature I had been prepared no less by his letter than by reminiscence of certain boyish traits, and by deduced from his peculiar physical. His voice varied rapidly from a tremulous indecision, when the animal spirits seemed abrupt, weighty, unhurried, and hollow-sounding enunciation. Be observed in the lost drunkard or the irreclaimable eater. It was thus that he spoke of the object of my visit, of his earnest desire to see me, and of the solace he expected me to afford him. He entered at some length into what he conceived to be the nature of his malady. It was, he said, a mere nervous affection, he immediately added, which would undoubtedly soon pass off, displayed itself in a host of unnatural sensations. Some of these, as he detailed them, interested and bewildered me, although perhaps the terms and general manner of the narration had their weight. He suffered much from a morbid acuteness of the senses, the most in texture, the odors of all flowers were oppressive. His eyes were tortured by even a faint light, and there were but peculiar sounds, and these from stringed instruments which did not inspire him with horror. To an anomalous species of terror, I found him a bounden slave. I shall perish, said he. I must perish in this deplorable folly. Thus, and not otherwise shall I be lost. I dread the events of the future, not in themselves, but in their results. I shudder at the thought of any, even the most trivial soul. I have indeed no abhorrence of danger, except in its absolute effect, and terror, in this unnerved, in this pitiable condition. I feel that the period will sooner or later arrive when I must abandon life and reason together in some struggle with the grim phantasm, fear. I learned, moreover, at intervals and through broken and equivocal hints, another singular feature of his mental condition. He was enchained by a superstitious impression in regard to the dwelling which he tenanted, and whence, for many years, he had never ventured forth. In regard to an influence whose supposititious force was conveyed in terms too shadowy here to be restated, an influence which some peculiarities in the mere form and substance of his family mansion had, by dint of long suffering, he said, obtained over his spirit, an effect which the physique of the grey walls and turrets, and of the dim tarn into which they all looked down, had at length brought about upon the moral of his existence. He admitted, however, although with hesitation, that much of the peculiar palpable origin to the severe and long-continued illness, indeed to the evidently approaching dissolution of a tenderly beloved sister, his sole companion for long years, his last and only relative on earth, her decease, he said, with a bitterness that which I can never forget, would leave him the hopeless and the frail, the last of the ancient race of ushers. While he spoke, the Lady Madeline, for so was she called, passed slowly through a remote portion of the apartment, and without having noticed my presence, disappeared. I regarded her with an utter astonishment not unmingled with dread. And yet I found it impossible to account for such feelings. A sensation of stupor oppressed me. As my eyes followed her retreating steps, when the door at length closed upon her, my glance sought instinctively and eagerly the countenance of the brother. But he had buried his face in his hands, and I could only perceive that a far more than ordinary wanness had overspread the emaciated fingers through which trickled my passionate tears. The disease of the Lady Madeline had long baffled the skill of her physicians. A settled apathy, a gradual wasting away of the person, and frequent, although transient, affections of a particularly cataleptical character, were the unusual diagnosis. Hitherto she had steadily borne up against the pressure of her malady, and had not betaken herself finally to bed, but on the closing in of the evening of my arrival at the house, she agitation, the prostrate power of the destroyer, and I learned that the glimpse I had obtained of her person would thus probably be the last I should obtain, that the lady, at least while living, would be seen by me no more. For several days ensuing, her name was unmentioned by either Usher or myself, and during this period I was busied in earnest endeavors to alleviate the melancholy of my friend. We painted and read together, or I listened, and thus, as a closer and still closer intimacy admitted me more unreservedly into the recesses of his spirit, the more bitterly did I perceive the futility of all attempting at cheering a mind from which darkness, as if an inherent positive quality, poured forth upon all objects of the moral and physical universe. In one unceasing radiation of gloom, I shall ever bear about me a memory of the many solemn hours I thus spent alone with the master of the house of Usher. Yet I should fail in any attempt to convey an idea of the exact character of the studies or of the occupations in which he involved me or led me the way. An excited and highly distempered ideality threw a sulphurous luster over all. His long improvised dirges will ring forever in my ears. Among other things, I hold painfully in mind a certain singular perversion and amplification of the wild air of the last waltz of Von Weber, brooded, and which grew, touched by from these paintings, vivid as their images now are before me. I would in vain endeavor to educe more than a small portion which should lie within the compass of merely written words. By the utter simplicity, by the nakedness of his design, he arrested and overawed attention. If ever mortal painted an idea, that mortal was Roderick Usher. For me, at least, and the circumstances then surrounding me, there arose out of the pure abstractions of the hypochondriac contrived to throw upon his canvas an intensity of intolerable awe, no shadow of which felt I ever yet in the contemplation of the certainly glowing yet too concrete reveries of Fuseli. One, the phantasmagoric conceptions of my friend, partaking not so rigidly of the spirit of abstraction, may be shadowed forth, although feebly, in words. A small picture presented the interior of an immensely long and rectangular vault or tunnel, with low walls, smooth, white, and without interruption or device. Certain accessory points below the surface of the earth. No outlet was observed in any portion of its vast extent, and no torch or other artificial source of light was discernible. Yet a flood of intense rays rolled throughout, and bathed the whole in a ghastly and inappropriate splendor. I have just spoken of that morbid condition of the auditory nerve, which rendered all music intolerable to the sufferer, with the exception of current effects of stringed instruments. It was perhaps the narrow limits to which he thus confined himself upon the guitar, which gave birth, in great measure, to the fantastic character of his performances. But the fervid facility of his impromptus could not be so accounted for. They must have been, and were, in the notes as well as in the words of his wild fantasias, for he not unfrequently accompanied himself with rhymed verbal improvisations, the results of that intense mental collectedness and concentration to which I have previously alluded as observable, and only in particular moments of the highest artificial excitement. The words of one of these rhapsodies I've easily remembered. I was perhaps the more forcibly impressed with it as he gave it, because in or mystic current of its meaning, I fancied that I perceived, and for the first time a full consciousness on the part of Usher, the tottering of his lofty reason upon her throne. The verses, which were entitled The Haunted Palace, ran very nearly, if not accurately, thus. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head, and the monarch, thoughts dominion, stood there. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. This, all this was in the olden time long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day, along the ramparts bloomed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley, through two luminous windows saw, spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Roundory well befitting, the ruler of the well realm was seen, and all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, 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 sparkling evermore. Troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing, and voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things, in robes of sorrow, assailed the monarch's high estate. Let us more, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. Around about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within that valley, through the red lighted windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a rapid ghastly river through the pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever, and laugh but smile no more. I well remember that suggestions arising from this ballad led us into a train of thought, wherein there became manifest an opinion of Usher's, which I mention not so much on account of its novelty, for other men have thought thus, as on account of the pertinacity with which he maintained it. Still early? Okay. This opinion, in its general form, was that of the sentience of all vegetable things, but in his disordered fancy, the idea had assumed a more daring character, and trespassed under certain conditions upon the kingdom of inorganization. I lack words to express the full extent or the earnest abandon of his persuasion. The belief, however, was connected, as I have previously hinted, with the gravestones of the home of his forefathers. The conditions of his sentience had been here, he imagined, fulfilled in the method of collocation of these stones, the order of their arrangement, as well as in that of the many fungi which overspread them, and of the decayed trees which stood around, above all, in the long undisturbed endurance of time. Endurance of this arrangement, and in its reduplication in the still waters of the Tarn, its evidence, the evidence of the sentience, was to be seen. He said, and I here started as he spoke, in the gradual yet certain condensation of an atmosphere of their own about the waters and the walls, the results was discoverable, he added, in that silent yet importunate and terrible influence which for centuries had molded the destinies of his family, and which made him, I now saw him what he was. Such opinions need no comment, and I will make none. Our books, the books which for years of the mental existence of the invalid were, as might be supposed, in strict keeping with its character of phantasm. We pored together over such works as the Ververte Chartreuse of Grisset, the Belphegor of Machiavelli, the Heaven and Hell of Swedenborg, the Subterranean Voyage of Nicholas Klein by Holberg, the Chiromancy of Robert Flude, of Jean d'Indagne, and of de la Chambre, the Journey into the Blue Distance of Tieck, son of Campanella. One favorite volume was the small octavo edition of the Directorium Inquisitorium by the Dominican Emeric de Giron. There were passages in Pomponius Mela about the old African satyrs and the Egipans over which Usher would sit dreaming for hours. His chief delight, however, was found in the perusal of an exceedingly rare and curious book in quarto Gothic, the Manual of a Forgotten Church, the Vigiliae Mortuorum Secundum Coram Ecclesiae Meguntinae. I'm tired. I cannot help thinking of the wild ritual of his work, and of its probable influence upon the hypochondriac when one evening, having informed me abruptly that the Lady Madeline was no more, he stated previously to its final ending. The worldly reason, however, assigned for this singular proceeding was one which I did not feel at liberty to dispute. The brother had been led to his resolution, so he told me, by consideration of the unusual character of the malady of the deceased, of certain obtrusive and eager inquiries on the part of her medical men, and of the remote and exposed situation of the burial ground of the family. I will not deny that when I called to mind the sinister contrivance at the house, I had no desire to oppose what I regarded as at best but harmless, by no means an unnatural precaution. At the request of Usher, personally aided him in the arrangement, we two alone bore it to its rest. The vault in which we placed it, and which had been so long unopened that our torches was small, damp, and entirely without means of admission for light. Lying at great depth, immediately beneath that portion of the building in which was my own sleeping apartment, it had been used apparently in remote feudal times for the worst purposes of donjon keep, and in later days as a place of deposit for powder or some other highly combustible substance. As a portion of its floor and the whole interior of a long archway through which we reached it were carefully sheathed with copper. The door of massive iron had been also similarly protected upon its hinges. Within this region of horror, I had a fucking cape. That's fucking cute. Trestles within this region of horror, he partially turned aside the yet unscrewed lid of the coffin and looked upon the face of the tenant. A striking similitude between the brother and sister now first arrested my attention, and Usher, divining perhaps my thoughts, murmured out some few words which I learned that the deceased and himself had been twins, and that sympathies of a scarcely intelligible nature had always existed between them. Our glances, however, did not regard her unawed. The disease, which had thus entombed the lady in the maturity of youth, had the mockery of a faint blush upon the bosom and the face, that suspiciously lingering smile upon the lip, which is so terrible in death. Replaced and screwed down the lid, and having secured the door of iron, made our way with toil into the scarcely less gloomy apartments of the upper house. An observable change came over the features. His ordinary occupations were neglected or forgotten. He roamed for minutes, had assumed, if possible, a more ghastly hue, but the luminousness of his eye had utterly gone out. The once occasional huskiness of his tone was heard no more, and the tremulous quaver, as if of extreme terror, habitually characterized his utterance. There were times, indeed, when I thought his unceasingly agitated mind was laboring with some oppressive secret to divulge, which he struggled for the necessary courage. At times again, I was obliged to resolve all into the mere inexplicable vagaries of madness, for I beheld him gazing upon vacancy for long hours in an attitude of profoundest attention, as if listen infected me. I felt creeping upon me by slow yet impressive superstitions. It was especially upon retiring to bed late in the night of the 7th or 8th day after the placing of the Lady Madeline within the donjon that I experienced the full power of such feelings. Sleep came not near my couch. While the hours waned and waned away, I struggled to reason off the nervousness which had dominion over me. I endeavored to believe that much, if not all, of what I felt was due to the bewildering influence of the gloomy furniture of the room, the dark and tattered draperies which, tortured into motion by the breath of a rising tempest, swayed fitfully to and fro upon the walls, and wrestling uneasily about the decorations of the bed. But my efforts were fruitless. An irrepressible tremor gradually pervaded my frame, and at length there sat upon my very heart an incubus of utterly causeless alarm. Shaking this off with a grasp and a struggle, I uplifted myself upon pillows, and peering earnestly within the intense darkness of the chamber, hearkened, I know not why, except that an instinctive spirit prompted me, to certain low and indefinite sounds which came through the pauses of the storm, at long intervals, I knew not whence. Overpowered by an intense sentiment of horror, unaccountable yet unendurable, I threw on my clothes with haste, for I felt that I should sleep no more during the night, and endeavored to arouse myself from the pitiable condition into which I had fallen, by pacing rapidly to and fro through the apartment. I had taken but few turns in this manner, when a light step on an adjoining staircase arrested my attention. I presently recognized it as that of Usher, and an instant afterward he rapped with a gentle touch at my door and entered bearing a lamp. His countenance was, as usual, cadaverously wan, but moreover there was a species of mad hilarity in his eyes, an evidently restrained hysteria in his whole demeanor. His air appalled me, but anything was preferable to the solitude which I had so long endured, and I even welcomed his presence as a relief. "And you have not seen it," he said abruptly, after having stared about him for some moments in silence. "You have not then seen it? But stay, you shall." Thus speaking, and having carefully shaded his lamp, he hurried to one of the casements and threw it freely open to the storm. The impetuous fury of the entering gust nearly lifted us from our feet. It was indeed a tempestuous, yet sternly beautiful night, and one wildly singular in its terror and its beauty. A whirlwind had apparently collected its force in our vicinity, for there were frequent and violent alterations in the direction of the wind, and the exceeding density of the clouds, which hung so low as to press upon the turrets of the house, did not prevent our perceiving the lifelike velocity with which they flew, hearing from all points against each other without passing away into the distance. I say that even their exceeding density did not prevent our perceiving this. Yet we had no glimpse of the moon or stars, nor was there any flashing forth of the lightning, but the under surfaces of the huge masses of agitated vapor, as well as all the terrestrial objects immediately around us, were glowing in the unnatural light of a faintly luminous and distinctly visible gaseous exhalation which hung about and enshrouded the mansion. You must not. You shall not behold this, said I, shudderingly sure, as I led him with gentle violence from the window to a seat. These appearances, which bewilder you, are merely electrical phenomena not uncommon, or it may be that they have their ghastly origin in the rank of miasma of the tarn. Let us close this casement. The air is chilling and dangerous to your frame, so we will pass away this terrible night together. Where is that from? I recognize it. If I recognize it, then there's a big chance that it's copyrighted. There we go. The antique volume which I had taken up was the Mattress of Sir Launcelot Cunning. I called it a favorite of Usher's more in sad jest than in earnest, for in truth there is little in its uncouth and unimaginative prolixity which could have had interest for the lofty and spiritual ideality of my friend. It was, however, the only immediately at hand, and I indulged a vague hope that the excitement which now agitated the hypochondriac might find relief. For the history of mental disorder is full of similar anomalies. Even the extremeness of the folly which I should read, could I have judged indeed by the wild overstrained air of vivacity with which he hearkened, or apparently hearkened to the words of the tale, I might well have congratulated myself upon the success of my design. I had arrived at that well-known portion of the story where Ethelred, the hero of the tryst, having sought in vain for peaceable admission into the dwelling of the hermit, proceeds to make good an entrance by force. Here, it will be remembered, the words of the narrative run thus. And Ethelred, who is by nature of a doughty heart, and who was now mighty withal, on account of the powerfulness of the wine which he had drunken, waited no longer to hold parley with the hermit, who in sooth was of obstinate and maliceful turn. Alright, I need you to chill, Cthulhu. Was of an obstinate and maliceful turn. But feeling the rain upon his shoulders and fearing the rising of the tempest, uplifted his mace outright and with blows made quickly room in the plankings of the door for his gauntleted hand, and now pulling there with sturdily he so cracked and ripped and tore all asunder that the noise of the dry and hollow sounding wood alarmed and reverberated throughout the forest. At the termination of this sentence I started, and for a moment paused, for it appeared to me, although I at once concluded that my excited fancy had deceived me. It appeared to me that from some very remote portion of the mansion there came, indistinctly to my ears, what might have been, in its exact similarity of character, the echo, but a stifled and dull one certainly, of the very cracking and ripping sound which Sir Launcelot has so particularly described. It was beyond doubt the coincidence alone which had arrested my attention, for, amid the rattling of the sashes of the casement, and the ordinary commingled noises of the still increasing storm, the sound in itself had nothing surely disturbed me. I continued the story. But the good champion, Ethelred, now entering within the door, was sore enraged and amazed to perceive no signal of the merciful hermit, but in the stead thereof a dragon of a scaly and prodigious demeanour, and of a fiery tongue, which sate in guard for a palace of gold, with a floor of silver, and upon the wall there hung a shield of shining brass, with this legend enwritten: Who entereth herein a conqueror hath been, who slayeth the dragon, the shield he shall win. And Ethelred uplifted his mace and gave up his pesty breath, which, with a shriek so horrid and harsh, and withal so piercing, that Ethelred had fain to close his ears with hands against the dreadful noise of it, like the like whereof was never before heard. Here again I paused abruptly, and now with a feeling of wild amazement, for there could be no doubt whatever that, in this instance, I did actually hear, although from what direction it proceeded I found it impossible to say, a low and apparently distant, but harsh, protracted, and most unusual screaming or grating sound, the exact counterpart of what my fancy had already conjured up for the dragon's unnatural shriek, as described by the romancer. Oppressed, as I certainly was, upon the occurrence of the second most extraordinary coincidence, by 1,000 conflicting sensations in which wonder and extreme terror are predominant, I still retained sufficient presence of mind to avoid exciting by any observation the sensitive nervousness of my companion. I was by no means certain that he had noticed the sounds in question, although assuredly a strange alteration had during the last few minutes taken demeanor. From a position fronting my own, he had brought round his chair so as to sit with his face to the door of the chamber, and thus I could but partially perceive his features, although I saw that his lips trembled as if he were murmuring inaudibly. His head, yet I knew that he was not asleep, from the wide a glance of it in profile. The motion of his body, too, was at variance with this idea, for he rocked from side to side, constant and uniform sway, having rapidly taken this. Sorry. Ah! Having rapidly taken notice of all this, I resumed the narrative of Sir Launcelot, which thus proceeded. And now the champion, having in the terrible fury of the dragon, bethinking himself of the brazen shield, of the breaking up of the enchantment which was upon it, removed the carcass from out of the way before him, and approached valorously over the silver pavement of the castle to where the shield was upon the wall, which in sooth tarried out for his full coming, but fell down at his feet upon. No sooner had these syllables passed my lips than, as if a shield of brass had indeed at the moment fallen heavily upon the floor of silver, I became aware of a distinct hollow metallic and clangorous yet apparently muffled reverberation. Completely unnerved, I leapt to my feet, but the measured rocking movement of Usher was undisturbed. I rushed to the chair in which he sat. His eyes were bent fixedly before, and throughout his whole countenance there reigned a stony rigidity. But as I placed my hand upon his shoulder, there came a strong shudder over his whole person. A sickly smile quivered about his lips, and I saw that he spoke in a low, hurried and gibbering murmur as if unconscious of my presence. Bending closely over him, I at length drank in the hideous import of his words. Not hear it? Yes, I hear it, and have heard it. Long, many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it, yet I dare not. Oh, pity me, miserable wretch that I am. I dare not speak. We have put her living in the tomb. Said I not that my senses were acute? And I'll tell you that I heard her first feeble movements in the hollow coffin. I heard them many days ago, yet I dare not speak. Now, tonight, Ethelred, the breaking of the hermit's door, and the death cry of the dragon, and the clangor of the shield, say, rather, the rending of her coffin, and the grating of the iron hinges of her prison, and her struggles within the coppered archway of the vault. Oh, whither shall I fly? Will she not be here anon? She not hurrying up to upbraid me for my haste? Have I not heard her footstep on the stair? Do I not distinguish that heavy and horrible beating of her heart? Madman! Here he sprang furiously to his feet and shrieked out his syllables as if in the effort he were giving up his soul. Madman, I tell you that she now stands without. There had been found the potency of a spell. The huge antique panels to which the speaker pointed, grew slowly back upon the instant, ponderous and ebony jaws. It was the work of the rushing gust, but then without those doors there did stand the lofty and enshrouded figure of the Lady Madeline of Usher. There was blood upon her white robes, and the evidence of some bitter struggle upon every portion of her emaciated frame. For a moment she remained trembling and reeling to and fro upon the threshold, then with a low moaning cry fell heavily inward upon the person of her brother, and in her violent and now final death agonies bore him to the floor of a corpse, and a victim to the terrors he had anticipated. From that chamber and from that mansion I fled aghast. The storm was still abroad in all its wrath as I found myself crossing the old causeway. Suddenly there shot along the path a wild light, and I turned to see whence a gleam so unusual could have issued, for the vast house and its shadows were alone behind me. The radiance was that of the full setting and blood-red moon which shone vividly through that once bare aperture, of which I have before spoken as the extending from the roof of the building in a zigzag direction to the base. While I gazed, this fissure rapidly widened. There came a fierce breath of the whirlwind. The entire orb of the satellite burst at once upon my sight. My brain reeled as I saw, like the voice of 1,000 waters, and the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed suddenly and silently over the fragment of... Right. I'm definitely at least gonna do a Halloween one. Mask of the Red Death. I have to. It's Mask of the Red Death. It's a fucking classic, so look forward to that on Halloween, hopefully.